This is a one-speaker meeting. Please welcome our speaker tonight, Alan.
My name's Alan Kramer, and I'm an alcoholic. And I'm not from the Pacific Group. And I'm grateful to be here tonight, clean and sober, at peace with myself and at peace with God as I understand Him. You know, when I came here, I was a drunk. And I came in these rooms, and you told me I was an alcoholic. And I thought, boy, that's a real lift in status. But, you know, life's been great. May is always a hectic month for me. I just celebrated 63 years of natal life, 31 years of marriage, and 19 years of sobriety. So, life's good. I grew up back east in Jersey. I was born in Newark. I was born in Newark, and I lived in the city till I was about 9, and then my parents moved out to the country. And I went out there, and there was this gang of kids that lived out in the country on the street we were on. There was about 10 of them. I was 9. They were from 13 to 17 years old. They all had guns, and they all had knives, and they were all crazy. And, you know, it took a couple of years till I adjusted to it, going from concrete to grass and weeds and trees. By the time I was 11, I had a gun, too. And, you know, we'd go out camping and shoot whatever was moving, whatever wasn't moving. We got to a point where we knew the range on shotguns, so we'd be able to shoot at each other, you know, and it would just sting a little bit. We had bows and arrows, you know, and we'd shoot the arrows back and forth to each other. You know, it was crazy. But I was always into adventure and excitement. And first drink I had, I was about 13 or 14. It really didn't mean anything to me. It was okay. I wasn't looking for anything out of it. It didn't do anything to me. I didn't pursue drinking. I drank now and then. I remember high school, I read a lot. I was into Ian Fleming, and James Bond was the thing, and I wanted to be James Bond. You know, I wanted the Dunhill, I wanted the Aston Martin, I wanted the tuxedo, I wanted the women. I still haven't gotten the Aston Martin yet. But anyway, you know, I hung out with a lot of guys that the closest I was to a bus stop was 3 miles. So I had to rely on my parents to take me to dances, to take me to the pool hall. You know, so it was kind of weird. But I hung out with a lot of guys. We all wore suits in high school. We were called greasers. Used to hang out up at the Apollo for Murray the K shows. You know, and we'd go down to American Bandstand in Philadelphia. We wore suits, and we hung out on the boardwalk, and we sang a cappella. And most of the guys were doing two-and-alls and suck-and-alls and getting loaded and nodding out against the walls, and it just didn't appeal to me. You know, there was music, there was women, and why waste your time nodding out on the walls? So I just didn't get loaded. I didn't drink that much. You know, I never pursued getting drunk. I just pursued adventure and excitement. I got out of high school, and the draft came along, and I didn't want to be drafted, so I joined the Marine Corps. And I figured, you know, the Marines, if I go in the Army in the draft, they're just going to use me as a body. They don't care one way or the other, whether I get killed or whether I come back. I figured the Marines would teach me how to kill and get back. So I went to Vietnam. This was 1967. And I set foot there, and that was the thing. That was my fix. Everybody talks about that first drink that they chased. After I touched ground in Vietnam, I knew that's where I wanted to be. I was looking for the excitement. They gave me the guns. They told me I could go kill people. Just don't get killed and come back. And it was exciting, and I loved it over there. It reached a point where I lost touch with reality. I spent most of my time out on operations, search and destroys. I enjoyed it. It was exciting, and it was my fix. And I would have stayed if I could have stayed longer. But anyway, back to the story. Labor Day weekend, 1967, our base got hit. I just happened to be back on the base. They blew up half of the base. And we were in the middle of what they blew up. I ended up going from one bunker to another, and I was in my bare feet, and I had to run across a burning tent deck. I ended up burning both my feet and got a shrapnel wound. And I'm sitting in a bunker, and I'm scared. And I'm not scared that I'm going to die or something. I'm scared because I don't have any weapons, and I can't do anything, and I can't walk. And I prayed to God. I said, get me through this. I'll never ask you for anything the rest of my life. And for 23 years, I lived that way. They helicoptered me out. I stayed on a ship, a hospital ship, for about 3 weeks till my feet were better. I went back out, back to doing the same thing I did. 2 weeks before I was supposed to rotate back, they sent me out on another operation out to this place called the Rock Pile. And rather than fly me out on a chopper, they told me to go out on a convoy. And everybody knew that very few convoys got through there. Halfway out to the rock pile, we got hit. The radio man that was with me, he got killed. I ended up on the side of the road, and we're fighting back and forth. They're on one side of the road, we're on the other side, and we're shooting back and forth and rolling grenades. A grenade comes rolling over the road and hopping over just like slow motion. And it gets in front of me, and all I can do, there's no place to go. I just put my head down, and it bounced sideways, killed the guy next to me, and just wounded me. I got back out of Vietnam, and I walked into race riots, war protests, and people that didn't seem to like what we were doing over there. And I just didn't fit in. I wasn't comfortable. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to leave the country. I had opportunities to go to Saudi Arabia and ride the pipelines, but I just didn't want to leave the States. So I hung around, tried to adjust, got a motorcycle, hung out at the beach, and I ran into some friends from high school, and they had a head shop. And I had been doing a lot of painting and everything before I went in the service. And they asked me to do some painting in the store, so I was doing some psychedelic murals and things like that in the store. And then I started doing nightclubs. And they opened a second store, and they asked me to run the store for them. Now, I'm still not like getting loaded. I'm still not really drinking. I smoked 2 joints in Vietnam. The second joint that I smoked, I slept halfway through a rocket attack. So I gave up on that. Where I was based, we didn't go, we didn't have a town that we went to. It's not like the movies where you went into town and you drank and you got loaded and, everybody was smoking dope. It wasn't like that where I was. I was 4 miles from the DMZ. So you got 2 beers a night if we had beer, and that was about it. You didn't get off base unless you went on an operation. So anyway, I start working for these guys. And, I'm selling hash pipes and papers and bell-bottoms and all this stuff, And everybody's getting loaded around me, and I'm just like, don't see any reason for it. I'm just enjoying being alive. But I'm still not adjusting. I'm missing the adventure. Another running buddy from high school shows up, and he starts working with me, and we decide we're going to be drug dealers. So we go out and we buy 50 keys of cellophane, Mexican cellophane. And we turn that over and we start doing some stuff. And we got real successful. We were doing a lot of cocaine, a lot of crystal meth. Now I started using drugs at that point, and I was using them because I was selling them. I wasn't selling them so I could use them. And we were doing good. I had 2 houses at the Jersey Shore. I had a suite in West New York, a 3-bedroom suite overlooking Manhattan. I had the cars, I had the women. I got involved in music. I was trying to put a band together. I had this distribution thing going. I opened up a wholesale business I had a bunch of guys that stayed in this garage, and I just fed them a whole bunch of pot, and they'd sit there and they'd make brass pipes out of fittings, and they'd tool leather belts and all this stuff. Everything was working. Everything was like, it was cool. It was a great life. There was a lot of fun, and I'm sitting on my porch one night down the shore, and all of a sudden about 8 cars come screaming up to the front of the house and pulling into the driveway, and it's New Jersey State Narcotics. And they got warrants issued by the grand jury for search and arrest. They had taps on our phones. They had a guy 2 blocks over on the 3rd floor of a house watching us. They got my partner for sales, and they got me for maintaining houses. And it shattered me. It was the first time in my life that I had failed at something. You know, I made it through Vietnam successfully. I was good over there at what I did. I was good at what I did before I went to Vietnam, and I was good at dealing, except I screwed up and had a partner that wasn't so good. But I was traumatized. We're going to court, and we're going through these trials, and we're doing jury trials, you know, and we're picking the jury, and I can't deal with just doing cocaine and speed and sitting in a courthouse. So I start drinking. I start drinking really heavy to block it all out. And at that point, that's when I crossed the line in the alcohol. And my whole goal was just to get numb. The first trial, we go for sentencing. I got a deal because they really didn't have me for the sales. They couldn't get any of the possessions on me. They couldn't get anything except that I owned the 2 houses. So I get a deal where I'm going to get a suspended sentence and probation. Now we go in for the sentencing, and my partner disappears. He was in the hallway, but he took off. And the judge calls his name, and he's not there. So he calls my name, and he gives me 3 to 5 in Trenton State. So I'm sitting in the holding cell, and I'm not praying to God, because God's there, but, you know, we got this deal. All my life, that whole time, I knew there was God around, you know, but we had the deal. God was cool, but I was going to do it my way, you know, one day at a time. And so I'm sitting there wishing I was going to Rahway instead of Trenton, because I know people in Rahway, and I don't know anybody in Trenton, and Trenton's a scary place. So they come and get me, and they put me in the truck. I said, "We going to Trenton?" He goes, "No, I'm taking you back to the courthouse." So the lawyer got a retrial because I had signed a plea agreement. So I got another lawyer for the second trial, and he goes, "Okay, we can do this." He goes, "I need a check for $10,000 for my retainer, and I need $30,000 in cash." And, you know, and I got the money. I don't have lots of money, but I got the money. So I give him the money, and we go to court every week. And I sit in the hallway, and he goes in the back room. And we do this for almost a year. And I'm, like, deteriorating worse and worse. I can't go back to the houses. Every time I try and live at the house, they come on a weekend, on a Friday night, saying that I missed a court appearance with a warrant. And they just want to lock me up for the weekend. They want to run me down until I'm destroyed. So finally, the one day I said, "You know what, go in and tell them I'm done. They can do whatever they want to do. I just can't take this anymore. You know, I'm drinking 24/7. I just can't do anything else except drink, and I'm living in the back of a store." So he goes in, and he comes back out. He goes, 2 years probation, $1,000 fine. And basically all they wanted to do was destroy me. You know, at this point, I'm on the verge. I'm losing the houses. I don't really care. All I care is that, you know, I'm finally free. So I try hanging out in Jersey a little longer, and I end up in 2 more busts. And it was other people. They came into the house. The one night they came in from New York into Jersey. The DEA came in, snatched these 2 guys up, and hauled them back to New York. They took my name both times, and nothing ever happened. I'm on probation, and probation back then, nobody really cares that you're on probation. You show up once a month. So I decided I got to leave. So I call my parents. They're living in Arizona. I said, "I want to come and visit. Trouble is, I don't have any money." And they said, "Okay, well, we'll get you a plane ticket." You know, so I go to probation. I say, "I want to leave and go to Arizona." They said, "You can't leave. You're on probation." And they said, "Besides, you still owe us $1,000. So I call my parents, say, "You know, I need $1,000 besides the plane ticket." And they go, "Well, what's going on?" I said, "I'll explain when I get there." So they send me $1,000. I pay them, and they said, okay, you got to sign this paperwork here. We'll take you off probation. You can't return to New Jersey. Now, I don't know if they were legitimate, whether it's real and true that but I didn't care. I signed it, and I leave. I get to Arizona, and my parents go, what happened? I tell them, and they go, oh, we were relieved. We thought maybe you were a heroin addict or something. But, my big idea now is I'm going to work in the copper mines for a while, get enough money to move to Florida. Like, I really need to move to Florida now. Well, I can't get a job there, so I end up back in retail at, I think it was like $1.65 an hour. And, I got no clothes. All I got are glitter rock. I got satin suits and velvet suits. And I got, pythons with 6-inch heels and 3-inch platforms. And I'm going to work in a department store. I had to cut my hair. I had to go buy a pair of shoes and a pair of pants and a shirt and tie. And I started working there. Next thing I know, I'm an assistant buyer, and things are working out okay. I meet this girl in the cosmetics area, and we start fooling around. She's married, and I convince her to get a divorce and marry me. So that happens. And then my drinking is so bad, though, I lose that job, and I pretty much drank my way through all the jobs I could get in Arizona. So I come out here to California. And I come out here, and I hook up with this headhunter, and she starts trying to find me jobs. And I'm driving back and forth from Tucson to here. I start sleeping with her so that she'll give me connections that she knows about but don't pay any commission to her. So she gets me this job, and then I come over here, I start working. My wife finally comes over 2 months later, and this gal gets her jobs. And then my wife finds out about what's going on, and she goes, well, that's okay, that's just the drinking. I said, yeah, I know, I won't do this anymore, that's cool. Anyway, I drink my way through as many jobs as I can get, I just keep losing them. Finally, I run into a friend from Arizona that moved out here. I used to be in a band with him, and he's now working on movies. And so I start doing pre-production wardrobes. So for 2.5 years, I'm doing pre-production wardrobes. We're not making any movies. I'm sitting at home reading scripts, doing the layouts, and drinking. My wife comes home and says, you got to go get a job. So I go out and try and get a job, and I realize I can't work because I'm drinking too much. So a friend of mine next door says, you got to go someplace. Maybe you ought to go to a meeting. So I said, okay. So he finds me a meeting, and I go to this meeting in Pasadena where I'm living, and it turns out it's a gay meeting. And I go, well, that's cool. If they can get sober, I can get sober. And this is in '83. I stopped drinking for 90 days. Now, I didn't get sober. I read the book. It was cool. The stories were great in the back, but I understood nothing. And I still got the deal with God. So I get a job after I'm sober for 90 days, or I stopped drinking for 90 days. As soon as I start working, I start drinking again because I got no program. So I go to this meeting once a week for a little over a year. And I never got any sober time after that. Finally, I got fed up with it because I'm sitting in the meetings and I'm hearing all these people whining. And they're whining that, they went and they sat outside a bar the night before. And they were sitting in the car and they wanted to drink and they were crying. And they're crying and whining in the meeting. And they wanted to go to a crack house. What I didn't hear was that they didn't get loaded. I just heard the whining about it. So I quit going to the meetings and I just went further downhill. It took me until 1990 to get back in these rooms. At that point, I was drinking 2 quarts of vodka a day. I was working. When I worked, I didn't drink, and when I started getting the shakes, I drank Listerine. I'd get up in the morning. I'd always save one mouthful of vodka. I'd take that mouthful of vodka, get in the shower, throw up, and head for work. I'd pick up a pint, drink it on the way to work. After work, after drinking the Listerine, I'd head for the liquor store again, get another pint, drink it in the parking lot, pick up a quart just before I got home, and drink that quart at night. And my wife is just, dealing with it. She don't know what to do with me. And one day my boss comes up to me. He goes, Alan, you got to go home and get some help. Now, he's the first person that didn't fire me. He just told me to go home and get some help. Now, if he had fired me, I don't know if I'd be standing here today, because I would have gone home, got another resume together, and gone out and got a job. I was good at getting jobs. I still had referrals. I still had references. The blank spots in my resumes just said management restructure. And nobody really questioned it. They'd hire me, and then I'd last a couple of weeks, and I'd get fired again, and I'd go out and I'd get another job. I dressed up real good. So I leave the store, and I'm standing in the alley, and I hear this voice, and it says, "It's all over, Alan. It's going to be all right." And I think it was God just saying, you know what, I'm fed up with this shit. You know, I'm saving your life too many times. I'm saving all these other people's lives that you're, close to killing, either running them over, I loved Arizona because they had drive-in liquor stores. You didn't have to get out of the car. Most of the time when I was here, I drove to the liquor store because I was too drunk to walk. So I get home and I start calling. I call AA and they go, "Oh yeah, there's a meeting." And I go, "No, that's not going to work." I hang up. I go back to the Yellow Pages. And I jump back there and I see this big ad. And it says, ASAP, ASAP, as soon as possible. So it's this recovery place, a treatment center out in the valley. So I call them up, and this gal Margie gets me on the phone, and she goes, "Why don't you come out here? We can help you out." She goes, I said, "I don't have any insurance." She goes, now I could have gone to the VA, but I wasn't in the mood for the VA. She goes, "Do you have $1,000? I said, "Yeah, I can manage that." She goes, "Okay, give us $1,000. We'll work out everything else. You can pay us off." She was so sweet. So I drive out there. I don't remember much of it. I think what happened was I must have got another bottle between the store and home. Most of the time I was in blackouts and grayouts. At work, I used to write stuff in a notebook during the day, so the next day I would know what I had done the day before. So I get out there, and I don't remember anything except talking to this really good-looking blonde. She says she introduced me to some other people. I don't remember any of it. She goes, "We're going to put you in the hospital." I said, "Okay, where is it? I'll drive over there." She goes, "No, your driving days are done for right now." They took my keys. They took me over to Valpress, and I spent 3 days in detox. I don't know why it was so quick. I don't know why it worked so good. God was working on me. They just gave me cranberry juice and a couple of Valiums a day. I never got shakes. I didn't get sick. Before I went, I said, "Margie, you better call up my wife and tell her where I am, because she thinks I'm at work." So she calls her and tells her that I'm going into the hospital. I went in the hospital. My blood test was .380 blood alcohol. And, I hadn't had all of it yet that I normally have, so I don't know. I was probably normally at 2.5 or 3 all the time. When I woke up, I was probably that loaded. Anyway, I got out of there, and it was a Saturday. A friend of mine picked me up, and I called the ASAP, and I said, "I'll be in on Monday, because this is a weekend, and if I'm paying this," because I don't know what treatment center, I don't know what they're going to do. I figured it's a weekend. So I go home, and I don't get loaded. I have no desire to drink. Everything just vanished. All the desires. It's like when you when you cross the international date line going to Vietnam, you lose a day. And it seems like I never got that day back until that day in the alley. When I heard those voices, whether it was my own mind talking to me and telling me, or whether it was God, but it just snapped me out of it, and I went, wow, where have I been for 22 years? And I went home. I didn't drink or anything. I went back on Monday, and they said, "Who are you?" I said, "Alan." I was supposed to, "Oh, okay." And they tested me, and I was clean. And I treated the 30 days there like boot camp. I said, "Tell me what to do. I got to figure out what to do to live out in this world." I didn't ask any questions. I just did what they told me. I worked on my steps. I did everything they told me. The first Saturday that I was in there, they had the family day, where all the families come, and I was the newest, so they put me and my wife in the middle, and they start yelling at me, and saying, "Why are you in here, and why did you do this, and why did you do that, and why did you do this to her?" And my wife tells me that she's got cancer, and that she'd been afraid to tell me, and that Margie talked her into telling me now. And I said, you know, you're going to have to call your sister and have her come out when you go in the hospital for the operation, because I have to stay here. This is my priority. I can't go with you and take care of you because I can't even take care of myself. So I stayed in there, and she went, you know, her sister came out. She told her sister I was out of town on business, and when she got here, she had to tell her that I was in a treatment center. And she went through the operation. Everything came out okay, you know, worked out all right. I got out after the 30 days, and they said, you know what, you've taken this too easy. You haven't gotten excited enough, you haven't yelled, you haven't cried, you haven't screamed. We want you to see a therapist. I said, fine, whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. So they hooked me up with this guy. He had 11 years. He was a chaplain in the reserves. He did family counseling, and he did drug counseling. So I started working with him, and I didn't do everything right. What happened was I didn't get a sponsor. I relied on him, and he started taking me all through the steps. And at 6 months, Desert Storm started, and he got called up to active duty and called me at work and said, I'm leaving tomorrow. I'll write you. And, you know, we had been working on the 4th step, but he knew I was damaged, and he had given me one of those long versions, the question and answer thing, instead of going out of the book. So he disappeared on me, and I started looking for a sponsor, and I just couldn't find anybody I trusted after him. And they wanted me to do it their way, you know, and I was like, I don't know, it just wasn't working. One guy finally said, look, get back in the 3rd step, work on the 3rd step, and something will happen. So I went back into the 3rd step and started working on God. I went into Emmett Fox, I went into Scott Peck, and I started learning that God was there for me. God expected me to forgive myself. God forgave me. I think the 3rd step is probably the most important step, because once you get the connection with God, when you do 5, He takes everything. You know, if you don't have a good connection with God, you're just telling another guy your secrets, and you're not getting the full release without having God. Now, I'm not saying it's not going to work if you don't find God, because eventually you'll do a 4th step and a 5th step when you do find God. But for me, it worked great. You know, I had the connection with God. I pray every day. In the morning, I ask God to show me a path where I'll be of service to others and no harm to myself. I do the 3rd step prayer. I do the 7th step prayer. I like the 7th step prayer because it's the loophole. It says that, you know, you can wake up in the morning with every single character defect, and that God will take all the defects from you that are of no use to Him. Now, that means He may leave you with a couple just to teach you some lessons. Both my parents have passed away in sobriety. Both of them were in comas before I could see them, so I was never really able to talk to them in the hospital. When my father had brain seizures, my mother called me, and I was supposed to speak at a meeting that night, and I couldn't get out of California anyway to get back to Arizona, and I didn't have the secretary's phone number. It was Snowplow. And he had this meeting, so I went to the meeting, and I told him what was going on, that my father was dying, and he goes, well, you know, you don't have to speak. I said, no, that's okay. That's what I'm here for. And speaking that night and talking about my father dying prepared me for going over there the next day. And it was just before Christmas, 2001, actually. And I got there, and my mother and I, you know, went to the hospital, and we hung out for a couple of days, and it was like real weird at the hospital because we knew he was dying. There was nothing they could do. And this guy came and said, you know, we can move him to a hospice. So we did that, and it turned out he died that night. And we took care of all the paperwork and everything, and I put her in the car, and I brought her back here for Christmas. 2 years later, I got a call from this guy that was seeing my mother. And he said, your mother's in the hospital, she's in a coma. And both my mother and father had living wills and DNRs, and they had her on a machine. She had pneumonia, but they couldn't figure out what was causing the fever. So I went over there and I said, she's not supposed to be on these machines. And they said, well, can you give us a little time? So I said, it bothered me, but I gave them a week and they couldn't solve the problems. And finally I said, we got to take her off the machine. I came back over there with my wife, and I stood there and they took her off the machines, and I held her hand while she passed away. And I kissed her on the forehead, and that was it. But, I didn't drink, I didn't use. I used the people in these rooms. I had to spend a week over there in her house, packing things up. I was all alone. But people called me, and people came by that were in Arizona that I had called that knew I was sober, and they helped me out, and they got me through it. My life is good today. I don't know where I'd be without these rooms, without the people in the rooms, without the steps, and without God. I don't know, I'm just grateful to still be alive. I'm grateful to be able to carry the message to other people. I don't work too good at sponsoring newcomers. I have a few people I sponsor, but they've probably, they've already been through the steps and they've lost their sponsors, and they just want somebody that can advise them. I have a rough time with young guys, or new guys. They're like kids. I don't like kids, One was enough, and I was the one. My wife, we don't have any kids. Before we got married, she had to go in for a checkup, and I said, why don't you get your tubes tied while you're there? But it's a good life. She stuck with me all those years, She's a normie. Nowadays, I still go out to rock and roll shows, and she's tired of it. I wore her out all those years, and she stays home, and there's a few women around these rooms that go to the shows with me, and she goes, it's fine as long as they pay for the ticket. And life is good. I work on the musicians' picnic. This is going to be the 24th picnic. I've been to 20 picnics. I've worked on them for 19 picnics. Neil helps me out. There's a number of people in here that work on the picnic. If you've never been to it, you should come out and see it. If you want to do some volunteer work, you can get a hold of Jay. We always need volunteers. It's a great event. I had 30 days the first one I went to, and I was just blown away, and I haven't stopped going back. Thank you for letting me share it.